Hello there and welcome back to another review. Today we're going to be having a look at Heroes of the East, reviewing from this amazing Shaw Brothers Blu-ray box set from Arrow Video. I know I mentioned before that probably Dirty Ho is probably one of my most favourite performances from Gordon Liu in terms of, like I say, Shaw Brothers and his films that he made. But Heroes of the East is another one that I would consider to be one, like, among my favourites, not just from Gordon Liu but from Liu Chiao-lang, and just I absolutely adore Heroes of the East, and I'm going to be getting into today why that is and why it's such a great film of mine, for the same reason that it's very light-hearted in nature, much like Dirty Ho was and is, and it's just a good fun kung fu movie. And Heroes of the East in particular has always been one of my favourites. I think it's a fantastic kung fu movie, and there's a lot to be said about this film. It doesn't take itself too seriously. Made in 1978, this was one of the rare instances where Gordon Liu's lead actually has hair. That's one thing you'll probably notice right away. He hasn't got his usual bald cut that he usually has. In this film, he actually does have hair. The film is set what I believe to be around, I want to say, 1930s, give or take. So that gives the film a somewhat more of a different setting compared to most contemporary kung fu movies. It's slightly more modernised than what you'd get in sort of the generic standard kung fu movie. This is a film that in many ways could have been filmed seriously, with that whole notion of Chinese versus Japanese, but the film is a lot more light-hearted in nature than that. And the reason why I love this movie so much is because it's so simple. The whole premise of this film is so simple. There's no massive plot twist. There's no really in-depth plot, sort of plot twists and turns that you have to follow. This film is so simple. And like I've mentioned before, where if you go back to lots of my Five Venoms review that I've reviewed recently, if you look at this film, like with Five Venoms, the plot is sort of front and centre in the story. Here, this is very much sort of, let's have a premise, but we'll just put loads of fights around that premise. And boy, oh boy, does it work. It really does work. It's so simple in the plot. It's just basically an arranged marriage. Husband is Chinese, wife is Japanese, and they compete and argue about whose martial arts is better. That, in many ways, is all you need to know about Heroes of the East. That is basically the whole premise of the film in a nutshell. Husband and wife, one's Chinese, one's Japanese, competing whose style is better and whose martial arts better. That is it. That is all you need to know in regards to the plot for this film. But it's just so damn enjoyable. It's just so unbelievably enjoyable. Unlike, say, films such as Fist of Fury, where the notion of Chinese versus Japanese and the Japanese are painted as villains, here both nations are seen as equal. Neither one is tarnished with that villain / sort of evil brush. They are very much sort of, just because you're from a different country doesn't mean you're inferior or anything like that. Like if you look at Fist of Fury, which is quite serious, here a lot more light-hearted. It's also worth mentioning as well that with all the bouts that take part in the movie, none of them end up in death. There's no sort of brutalities in this movie. There's no fatalities in this film. Each fight is done with respect for the other fighter. I mean, there is everything in this movie, from drunken boxing, nunchaku, ninjas, darts, Chinese swords, tonfa, you name it. There is everything in this movie. And that's what I love about it. You're getting everything in this movie. You are getting absolutely everything in this film. And that's why I love it, because it's just all-out martial arts from start to finish. And it's easily one of my favourites that I can watch any time. It really is. You can probably tell, I can't stress enough how good this film is. So as mentioned, Gordon Liu is being forced into a marriage to Lady Yumiko. He thinks she is going to be ugly, but he's like besotted with her as soon as he sees her. So after the ceremony, some of his classmates start to think he is actually beating her up and slapping her around. But what she is actually doing is practicing judo and karate sort of in the garden. But they can sort of hear her over the wall, and they think with the noises she's making and all the grunts that she's being like sort of physically abused by Gordon Liu. And he's like, no, what are you talking about? But she's just practicing sort of her judo and karate. Yuka Mizono is perfect in this. I believe that's how you say her name. Say like all the time. Forgive me if I say some of these actresses and actors' names wrong when reviewing some of these Hong Kong movies. I'm not always overly familiar with how some of the names are pronounced, but I think it's Yuka Mizono is perfect in this. There's like the tenacious wife, and she plays the part perfectly. So him and her start sort of competing and comparing styles, like him showing her the horse stance, etc. The film has a real kinetic energy to it, and it's like Charlene doesn't let his foot off the gas for one moment. The director, it's like he really is throwing. It doesn't. The film, by and large, keeps going all the way through. It just keeps on rolling and rolling and rolling. It really doesn't sort of stop at any point. It really doesn't even in some senses catch a breath, and that's what I like I say, the entertainment value is really high on this film. It is a really highly entertaining film. So she starts like destroying walls and garden pots, as she has like no punch bags to practice on. She gets her new weapons delivered, swords, sais, shows him kendo at one point. At one point starts using a chained she starts using like a chained hook on him as well at one point, because she's not worried. She just wants to show off her martial arts. As you get married, you have a bit of a crossword, and then your missus gets her chained hook on you. It's just simple stuff, simple domestic little, crossword, little argument. So things escalate and escalate, her even moving his weapons out to make room for hers, calling his weapons a load of junk. So she doesn't realise she's constantly putting his style down and his way of martial arts down, and he's like, I'm not going to let you speak like that. So he tries to show off his style too, and the whole thing just escalates and escalates, and it gets more and more and more with them. Like I say, they start just talking about, it's sort of in words first, then it's weapons, and it just builds and builds. So she thinks all these weapons are junk. They start dueling with spears, and even though Gordon Liu does beat her, she can't accept this, right? She can't accept that she's been beat. As mentioned, the film is set in the 1930s, I believe, so it's a bit more modern and westernised in its setting, where it takes place, like characters wearing suits and ties, etc., compared to the sort of more traditional kung fu robe that you would find in some of the other kung fu movies. So it even goes on to them comparing how they eat at the table, or should they kneel when eating. I love at one point she is sort of lobbing and throwing plates at him, and then even goes to pick up a whole dinner tray to throw at him, just like proving how livid and mad she is at Gordon Liu at this point. Just goes to throw a whole meal his way. What is great is neither can accept the other is right, so they're both just as stubborn at each other. So they start comparing weapons, and for each one that one shows, the other one has got one that's sort of the equivalent from the other person. So you've got like darts, sleeve arrows, hairpins, etc. Some great fighting around this time of the movie, and as well take note of the lighting as well, and some of the interior shots that really does work. The Chill Brothers sets being as dependable as ever when shooting some of these scenes. So they argue about the language, the culture, everything. Like, it's not just the martial arts, they're arguing about everything. That you've got for everything that the Japanese stand for and everything the Chinese stand for. They are going at it hammer and tongs, right? They are really just like, they cannot. I mean, if they were both this stubborn, I don't think there was any way sort of they might think, without sort of discussing this logically and intelligently, that they're ever going to get past this stage. So they have like a showdown in his training hall and use like tonfas. I think what makes it work, the movie, is that, like I mentioned, the plot is so simple and at times funny, but what you get is amazing martial arts, and not just that, but a huge variety too. You get a real plethora of different styles, different weapons. You get a real mishmash of kung fu and just martial arts in general. Loads of great fight sequences from two different countries and cultures connected by this very simple plot, but the film never feels simple in its execution, and that's the genius of it. Because the film is so varied in what you're seeing visually, the film, it never seems simple. Such is the genius of Liu Kar-leung. The whole film very much plays like a very involved martial arts movie, but it really isn't. But you are getting martial arts in this movie. Like, this is a film where the fight and the kung fu is very much front and centre, as with the case with most like Liu Kar-leung vehicles. I mean, some of his films are more intelligent than some of his other films, but Heroes of the East, in much bit like Dirty Ho, is very much, let's just have some fun, and that's what this is. But as well, at the same time, paying respects to both these different countries and their different styles, and really getting them both to show off what they can do, and their repertoire, and just get it across to the audience, these different things that maybe they hadn't seen before. Watch out for a mini supporting role played by Simon Yun as one of Gordon Liu's masters here. Yun Soo-tin, Yun Woo-ping's father, you may remember from the Drunken Master, Snake and the Eagle's Shadows films. Here we actually see his bald head for a change. So you have Gordon Liu without hair. Gordon Liu usually without hair has hair. And Simon Yun, who you usually see with in that beggar so sort of outfit, in this you actually see his bald head. So sort of differentiating between the two there. So after she can't accept what is happening, she leaves and goes back to Yokohama, which gives the film some nice variation and some scope, where we meet Yasuaki Kurata, Yasuaki Kurata. If I say it wrong, please forgive me as I say. I'm sure many of you will mostly remember from Fist of Legend, Twinkle Twinkle Lucky Stars, and he's sort of very protective of her. So to get her back, Liu sends her a letter basically saying, look, my style is the best, right? Sends her a letter saying, my style is the best, I'll challenge you to anything, use any weapon you want, I will beat you. So he basically, to get her back, he just insults her even more. Great way to get your wife back there. The rest of the fellow Japanese viewed this letter as an insult, even though that was not his intention. He didn't mean it in like an insulting way, but of course, if you're saying my style is the best, I'll challenge you, whatever, that's going to be taken as an insult. Of course it is. So because of this, all the Japanese experts go to fight him. We have judo, karate, nunchaku, ninja, sai, kendo. Like I say, we have a real hell of a lot going on here with the different styles. And I love as well when they get there, the Japanese, the fight just sort of begins. There's no massive sort of, it's got to be delayed. Like, there's no real build up. Like, they just arrive, they walk to his residence, and the challenge begins. The fight begins. Liu Qiaoleng doesn't delay the pace at all. And like I mentioned earlier, it keeps going. It's got a real ferocious energy to it, this film. In the order of fairness, though, after each bout, he is allowed a day's rest. Not just doesn't have to fight them one after the other, but he is allowed to sort of fight one. He can rest that evening. He can fight one the next day. So they are fair, and that's what I'm saying. There's no fatalities. There's no unfairness in this film. All about is just having that fair challenge, and just just seeing whose is better, who's going to win. It starts with this sword fight, to which Gordon Liu wins, and the guy's offering Gordon his sword after Gordon Liu beats him, but he doesn't take it, and this is like viewed because the guy's offering it like him sword because he yields basically, and Gordon Liu's character doesn't understand the custom. Next he has to fight the karate master. I'm not really sure where these Japanese go for like during the day at night. It's never like explicitly stated where they actually stay, where they sleep. They just sort of walk off after each fight and then they meet him the next day. So I'm not actually sure where they're sort of laying their heads at night, but again, doesn't really matter. I guess they're just staying at an inn or something. I have no idea. So Gordon Liu gets informed to use, and this is quite a genius part, he gets informed to use drunken boxing at one point against karate, and it's awesome that Simon Yun himself, Yun Soo-tin, is the one guy that recommends he uses that. Of course, playing Beggar So, Sam Seed in Drunken Master. And what's very interesting here, we have Liu Qiaoleng playing the drunken beggar role, and ironically enough, he would go on to sort of direct Jackie Chan in Drunken Master 2. Even though him and Jackie sort of fell out during the production of the movie, it is still regarded to be Liu Qiaoleng who directed the bulk of that film. But it's funny, a lot of connections with Drunken Master there. Gordon's friends like sort of attack Liu Qiaoleng as the drunken boxer role. And it's very many ways, this is sort of the standout scene, so we can sort of observe and copy the beggar's movements, which in many ways could be sort of the most fun of the movie at this point. And believe me, in this film there are many. Yumiko does inform him that she didn't want them to come and explain, like these Japanese people to come, that explains that he was offering his sword to you because he yielded. Yumiko and him, they sort of patch things up at this point. They're sort of back together, sort of all is forgiven. Gordon Liu just needs to get through the rest of these challenges from a fellow Japanese. So they're sort of back together. Drunken boxing wins over karate. Then he fights the nunchaku guy, and in the original VHS, obviously the UK release of this movie, the whole scene was omitted. Such were the laws with nunchaku at the time, especially most notably on the Bruce Lee movies that were sort of outlawed in this country. So the only way to see the film was either on a bootleg or something like that, or a sort of an international print or release of the cut of the movie. And I love this guy. He's even doing like the Bruce Lee war cries. He's doing the Bruce Lee noises. At one point, even using the tonfa with the nunchaku, and Gordon uses the free section staff. I mean, what a fight this is. I mean, like I said, mentioned about standout scenes. There's loads in this movie. There really is a lot of standout scenes that really do why Heroes of the East is so regarded, and especially in my eyes, one of the best films Liu Xiaolang's ever made. Absolutely phenomenal stuff. Just the speed and the overall fun of it all, relentlessly fast, just fantastic. Then he has to take on the spear guy, then the Sai guy, who has, like, I will mention the Sai guy has one hell of a mustache going on. Atal uses butterfly knives. This is just such a late night kung fu classic in every sense of word. Remember Eastern Heroes in the 90s, they had the late night collection. They're sort of, when it's called a late night kung fu movie, it's rooted in that aspect of you when you used to go to the cinema in London, and they'd have kung fu movies on late in the evening and things like that, and they were played sort of like midnight and things like that. And this film is a really, really fantastic film. So one of the guys comes to challenge him at 1 minute past midnight, so he has no rest. Atal starts using oil on his body, Gordon Lowe's character, so he can sort of grab him. Sanso, Kurata's character, is going to use ninja involving smoke bombs, dummies, stealth, etc., and tells him to meet him at Clearwater Pond. Both pretending to be farmers at this point. The whole end fight is sort of rooted in that element of stealth, like I mentioned, the ninja way, and they're sort of both pretending to be farmers in disguise. The picture here and the way the film looks is great because it moves to sort of location. It's mainly by and large at this point been all set based, but when it moves to location at the end, again, just Liu Xiaolang giving the film a bit more scope, a bit more variety in the overall visuals of the film. See some fantastic spear work at the end of the movie between the two. Uses, I mentioned earlier, flying darts, smoke, spikes. Again, no weapon is left out really in this movie. In this film, you probably get, I'd say, between this film and probably Legendary Weapons of China, you probably see every weapon there ever is involved with Chinese martial arts and kung fu. So I had this long fight, and it's like, I will see you at the Clearwater Pond. So they're not even there yet. I mean, because he says, meet me at Clearwater Pond. They have a fight. You think, this must be the end fight. And he's like, no, we're not. He goes, I'll see you at Clearwater Pond. So the end fight at this point hadn't even really begun. The speed, location, and lighting all come together on that final bout. Atal uses crane fist, and this is probably some of the most lightning fast fight choreography you will ever see from Liu Xiaolang. Really super fast stuff, and a really incredible end fights. I mean, as if we hadn't had enough already at this point. The film had more than outdone itself in terms of what you'd seen with regarding martial arts and everything. But the end fight, even just in itself, is a fantastic fight between the two. He ends up sort of using his breath holding technique, and with him accepting his sword, Kurata, as he yields. But what a film. I mean, there's so much to be said about this movie. I've tried to get through it somewhat quick, but if you've only seen sort of 36 Chambers and you've never ventured out into sort of other Gordon Liu vehicles, please, you have to watch, as I mentioned, Dirty Ho, but as well, definitely check out Heroes of the East, because it's just all out martial arts. As I say, the plot's simple, nothing hard to follow. There's some really sort of visually striking characters in the movie. Nothing too brutal here in the way of the fight scenes. As I say, no big plot twists and turns to follow. It is just straight out pure martial arts / kung fu entertainment. So please make sure to go and check out Heroes of the East. Thank you very much indeed for watching. I hope you enjoyed the review, and I'll see you soon.
Don't concentrate on the finger, or you will miss all that heavenly glory.